But because it's his territory, a lot of times they'll fly right towards you, fly over your head, and land on a perch on the other side of you. So the big thing with the flush is like try and flush him from different angles and get him to fly to the edges of his territories. They'll usually just fly to that last perch on the edge of their territory. And then when you go to flush them off there, they'll loop back around and go to a point you already scared them off of. So like, I'll come over here, flush him, he'll fly here. I'll walk over here and flush him, and he'll fly right back to here. Kind of just hop back and forth, and then I'll come from this angle, and he'll fly over here, flush him, and he'll go over there. So he'll just, it's just kind of getting them, trying to flush him from different angles to get an idea of what those boundaries of his territory is. And this technique, you know, it's a little bit more invasive in that we're, you know, actively flushing the bird. The other technique that people use to get an idea for territories is spot mapping. And spot mapping, you don't actively flush the bird. You just show up and you put on a map, you know, where the bird was when you were there. And it requires you visit 10 times to get your 10 points. But with that, number one, visiting 10 times when my field site is a whole state is not possible. But another thing is by flushing them, instead of just taking a note where they're singing when you get there, by flushing them, you're getting them to fly to the edges of their territories. So you're getting a better idea of how big his territory really is. They found when they compared the two methods that flush mapping always led to a bigger estimate of territory size, but they also think that's probably a more true estimate because you're getting an idea for his edges better than you would if you're just taking the point where he is. He might just be hanging out on his favorite perch every time you come and not flushing him. And it really is, it's really cool to actually actively do this because it's crazy how they just kind of fly in a circle the whole time when you're sitting there. It really makes you believe that they do have a territory, so better than just assuming that they do. No. Last year we did have 3 territories that were really close to each other, but the birds never went into it. They never overlapped. They were really close to each other, and they never even used the same tree. And it might be now that we're in Arizona where they're going to be, assuming they're a lot more dense, we might have some overlap in territories, but we'll have to look at that as we go. There's a lot of other territory mapping studies where they've mapped a bunch of territories. There's always a lot of overlap in their territories for other birds, so I wouldn't be surprised when Bendires are actually dense, if there's some overlap in their territories. It would be hard to map them when there's 2 birds.
So they're mostly in areas where they're year-round, or they leave. So in other words, you're saying that those are their permanent territories?
Yeah, that's why we want to wait like a week between each one, because we're assuming that if we wait 4 days between mapping, and when we first and they're still there, that they're going to be there.
There's never a period where they're alive, and since they're not alive in Johnson, but areas.
Not that we've found. But we did have one occurrence last year where we mapped the bird the first day we found it. We only got like 12 points, and we went back to map it again, and it was no longer in that area. If that happens this year, then we're just assuming that it might be good.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
This handout says 8 to 10 spots.
So 8 to 10 per visit. So yeah, this year we're doing a multiple visit thing. That's to hopefully avoid mapping birds that are migrating.
Okay, and what kind of commitment are you asking? Because I'm hearing like first we go and scout it, and then we go and do that.
Yeah, so the territory mapping does not necessarily have to be done by the same person that found the bird. It is kind of time sensitive in that once the bird is actively nesting and has nestlings, they become almost impossible to map because they're more focused on that. They don't really care about defending the territory anymore. So there is kind of a time sensitive thing. So like if someone finds a Beth on their transect, but they're not going to be able to map it, it's pretty important that we find another volunteer that's going to be able to go there and map it. Um, but it's not, you don't have to commit to it beforehand, so just,
If you can.
yeah, if you can, then you can. Any other questions about territory mapping? Start date, so I'm starting February 15th. I think if everything is ready to roll here with coordinating everything, that it's kind of between, I mean, as much as you can, each person can do between February 15th, once you feel comfortable doing the transects, till through June, so, or through May. Is everyone straightforward on territory mapping? It really is a lot simpler than it sounds to write it out. Hopefully that little packet of step-by-step instructions kind of reiterates things. But also if you ever have any questions too about it, just let me know. And hopefully we can kind of, if we can go out and find a Beth this afternoon, I don't know how much singing they're doing right now, if they've even, but if we could, I can kind of show it more in us how you would do it in person. It's a lot easier to understand than it is just through animation on PowerPoint. But it really is pretty easy. The hardest thing is just keeping track of your GPS points, knowing which, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and all that.
So Cody, this part here about choosing locations,
Yeah.
Chrissy and I are still working out how we're going to do that with the volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want them downloading the entire
Okay.
GPS file. I mean,
Yeah.
they don't.
Yeah, I wasn't sure on this one, but so pretty much, like she said, we're not sure how it'll exactly work when you guys get it, but right now I did post some maps that of each county, of all the transect clusters in each county that you can look at, and the numbers correspond to them. So you would just look at the county that you're interested in doing transects in, and then find one that you're interested in, and say, I want to do 36 or something like that, and then. How you get the rest of the information will be figured out later. But once you pick a transect and you get those GPS points, like I said, you want to just make sure you have your equipment. So you'll just need a way to get bearing, a way to do playback, and a GPS. Be ready to go. Oh, and binoculars. Don't forget those. Yeah. Any questions?
Yeah, we're going to have Cody's going to share with us the shapefile, which will let me do zoomed in maps of the transects for you guys. And yeah, the transects are already plotted out.
Yeah. So yeah, if the county maps that I've already made, you guys can look at those to select your transects, and then hopefully you can get.
And I have that as a PDF. I'll send it out to all of you guys.
And then hopefully you'll be able to get maps of each of the transects you choose that are closer up. But I haven't made those. So. Yeah, that's it for Pima County. Obviously.
Yeah, there are not that many in Pima County.
Yeah, the biggest restriction was private land in this county. I think it reduced the amount of transits. I'm not sure on the exact number. I can go back to the map that had them.
That red dot down there. So not any really that close to Tucson.
Cochise County.
Yes, there's quite a few. Yeah, Cochise County actually has quite a lot.
This one?
Yeah, Cochise actually has quite a lot.
I mean, this is a pretty big hotspot. Those don't, if you guys don't find Beth there.
And I'm going to actually reach out to folks who live in Portal to try to do some of those ones up near Portal. But, we need help down in the corner of the state. If anyone wants to take a day trip, some of them are near Wilcox, some of them are right at the base of the Pinaleño Mountains. So a lot of these are not that close to Tucson, but they're near really good birding spots. So it'd make a fun birding day to go out and do your survey and then go birding in the area.
And then the biggest point I want to make is that if you find, like, you're just out birding on your own for fun, and you're on public land, that it's public land and that I can have access to it, and you find a Bendire's, take a point for it and map it if you want to. Like incidentals, I can use those too, as long as they're on public land. I can't use incidentals you find, you know, in residential areas or near on private land, like ag land, unless you have connections with the landowner. But if you incidentally find Bendires on private land, treat it just, or public land, treat it just as you would if you found one on a transect, because I can't go there and I can look at the vegetation and I can't use that data. So that's a big thing too. It doesn't necessarily just have to be on a transect.
Okay, one big question for me. Okay, I'm doing my transect. I go to point number 1. I do the whole thing on the point count and playback data sheet. I find a bet. So after I finish that protocol, then I switch to the other sheet immediately and do the territory mapping before I go to point number 2.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a hard decision because it's like, what do I value more, finishing the transect or mapping the BEP? I would say map the BEP for a little bit, but give yourself enough time to finish the transect.
So we have like 4 hours, right, to go cover 3 points.
Yeah. So,
and you say like the mapping takes 30 minutes.
Yeah, if you can get 10 points.
So we just have to estimate, can we get it in time, get this done in time to go on to the next one? Because if we do it right then, they'll save us another trip.
Yeah, and that's how we did it last year. Just because you territory map that day, we still want to come back and visit that BEP, a week later to make sure that it was actually had a territory there. So that's the biggest difference between this year and last year's. We didn't always do a second visit. This year we want to make sure we're doing those second visits, especially down here in southern Arizona where there's a lot more BEP migrating through.
And then just to clarify, the second visit is only if you did detect a Bendire's Thrasher on that first visit. If you didn't find one, you don't have to go back.
The second visit, you're just going back to where you found that BEP. You're not going back and doing the transect. Going back to that BEP, you're mapping it again. You're getting 10 more points.
You only have about an hour to do it left. One after Capcom. Go back to the one about location that section.
Oh, the last one. So we don't, that's what Jimmy was saying, we don't know the exact process of how you guys will get your transects yet. But at this point, what you could do is you can look at the PDF maps of the county and at least pick a cluster that you want to do. And I would suggest, unless you plan on doing both transects yourself, find someone that wants to do a cluster with you if you want. One person do one transect that morning, the other person do the other. Or you could, dedicate more than one day and do both yourself.
Yeah, or even divide it up among 2 people.
Yeah, so that's the cluster number. So all the points for each of these will start with 6, 6, 3, 5. So yeah, that's what you would tell them you want, and then the process for how you get the rest of the information we'll figure it out later. But that's all you need to know. It's just how to pick your clusters at this point. There's 2 transects. So if you see the blue dots, those are the transects. Yeah, they don't always fall right in the cluster. They should be close to it, at least. Sometimes I had to move them outside the cluster so they weren't on top of mountains. Yeah. It'll be more obvious when you look at the actual PDFs on your own computer.
Are those way over there or like 65 and 67?
I don't know.
That's almost all the way out to Ajo. That's pretty far. There's some right out near Yuma too, but there are some birders who live out in Yuma that I was going to reach out to. So yeah, I mean, we don't have to, if you guys, there are birders in other parts of the state. We don't have to be going all the way up to Phoenix. The Phoenix people can do those.
Yeah, I also don't expect all the transects to get done. Obviously, I plotted a lot of them because there's going to be some that are impossible to do. So I just wanted there to be enough that if you run out of some, you can get more. And there's always the chance I could try and plot more around Tucson if people are really limited by how far they want to go from Tucson. But also, like I said, I can use incidentals. So if you go out and find BEP on public land, at least you know the territory mapping now. You can do that. If you find one, you can go out and territory map it at least, even if you just find it when you're out doing whatever.
No, that's out at 3 points. That's pretty far out. We're not going that far. Right, so the one we're gonna go look for right now is not on here, right? So that'd be an incident helper.
Yeah, exactly. And the main point of the transects is to keep the diversity of vegetation, like keep a diversity in the vegetation we survey. So that's why we can't just say, everyone just go find Beth. We don't care where you find them because, that would tend to find them only in one habitat. So the transects keep us serving areas that we got.
And it's kind of cut off, but there's some, on the bottom of this map, there's a few clusters right here where we go. That are pretty fun. Yeah, I do want to see people go to this kind of content, but I feel a lot of it's going to happen. Who doesn't want to go to this kind of work?
Yeah, I like to focus. Yeah.
Yes, I'll send that video that has all the counties split out to you. All right, so is everybody clear on where we're, okay, first of all, who would like to go do this optional CAP Bendire search? All right, yeah. Okay, so anyone who's interested in coming, is everybody clear on where we're going? Everyone have a directions page? Yeah, that's right. That's where we're going to meet. That's where people have been seeing him. We should be doing cars there, right? That is where people have been seeing him quite easily. Is right, kind of where everybody parks and walks in a little bit to the ponds. People reported this Bendire Thrasher just a few days ago, so it should be around. It's okay. Yeah. So you don't have to carpool, but if anybody's interested in carpooling, so first of all, who's okay with carpooling in terms of being a driver? And which means you have to come back here to get the person back to their vehicle. I can take two because I'm Cody. All right. So who wants to ride with me? Nancy's riding with me. Anybody else? Okay. So I have a full car. Is anybody else interested in carpooling? All right. So is everybody who's going clear on where we're going? Okay. So let's raise hands too. So make sure I can count everybody when we get there. How many people are going? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. So 9 people. All right. So I don't lose people and do something. Okay, so, all right, everybody good? I don't know, actually. Does anybody know where's the good? I don't actually know. Not you telling me, I don't know that good. But I think we're just going to a regular place.
Place where you sort of stand on the stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't have a UPS for the bird.